Welcome back to Tales from the Veil, where the whispers of other worlds become stories. Tonight, we journey to the edge of the world, to a lonely coast where a single lighthouse stands against the eternal fog. This is the story of Elias, the lantern keeper. For as long as anyone could remember, the light of the Serpent's Tooth lighthouse had never faltered. It was a beacon for sailors and a point of comfort for the villagers of Port Blossom, a tiny hamlet nestled in the shadow of the cliffs. Elias was as much a part of the landscape as the ancient stones he tended. A man of few words, with eyes the color of a storm-tossed sea and hands calloused from a lifetime of winding the great clockwork mechanism that turned the light. He lived alone, his only companions the seabirds and the rhythmic crash of waves. The villagers saw him as a silent guardian, a fixture. They'd leave supplies at the base of the winding stone path, sacks of flour, salted fish, and news from the world beyond the mist. But no one had climbed those steps in over 50 years. No one had seen the inside of the lighthouse, or spoken to Elias for more than a fleeting moment when he did descend for his annual walk along the shore. Our story truly begins with a young woman named Lena. She was an artist, new to Port Blossom, drawn by the dramatic cliffs and the ethereal, ever-present fog. Unlike the locals who accepted the lighthouse as a simple fact of life, Lena was consumed by it. She painted it at dawn, at dusk, in the dead of night. But it was the keeper who truly fascinated her. Who was this man who kept the light burning, who lived a life of such profound solitude? One evening, a terrible storm, the likes of which hadn't been seen in a generation, rolled in from the sea. The wind howled like a banshee, and the waves clawed at the cliffs. The villagers huddled in their homes, praying for the fishing boats still caught out in the tempest. All eyes were on the lighthouse, their only hope. And then, the unthinkable happened. The light flickered. It sputtered once, twice, and then went out. A collective gasp swept through Port Blossom. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating blanket that swallowed the world. Panic set in. Without the light, the boats were sailing blind, heading straight for the treacherous rocks known as the Dragon's Teeth. Lena, watching from her cottage window, felt a cold dread mixed with a strange resolve. She couldn't just stand by. Tying a thick scarf over her head and grabbing an old oil lamp, she did what no one else dared. She ran out into the storm, towards the path that led to the lighthouse. The ascent was a nightmare. The wind threatened to tear her from the slippery steps, and the rain stung her face like needles. Finally, gasping for breath, she reached the heavy oak door of the lighthouse. It was unlocked. Pushing it open, she stepped inside, out of the gale. The base of the tower was silent, save for the storm raging outside. It was meticulously clean, everything in its place. A spiral staircase wound its way up into the darkness. "Hello," Lena called out, her voice trembling. "Elias? Are you here?" Only the echo of her own voice answered. With her heart pounding, she began to climb. She passed a small, Spartan living area. A simple bed, neatly made. A table with a single chair. A book, open on the table, its pages filled with elegant, looping script. It was a logbook, but as she climbed higher, a strange coldness seeped into the air. The stone walls seemed to weep with a chilling dampness. She finally reached the lamp room at the very top. The great lens, a magnificent construction of glass and brass, was still and dark. And there, beside the mechanism, was Elias. He was slumped in a chair, his face peaceful, his eyes closed. He looked as if he were merely sleeping. But the stillness of his chest, the waxy pallor of his skin, Lena knew at once. He was gone. Grief and panic warred within her. But the boats, the sailors, she had to get the light working. She examined the mechanism. It was a complex array of gears and counterweights. Tucked into a small crevice in the wall, she found a small, leather-bound journal, Elias's personal diary. Her hands shook as she opened it. The first entry was dated 50 years ago. It was written by a much younger, more vibrant Elias. He wrote of his love for the sea, his pride in his duty, and of a woman named Alara. He described her laughter like the ringing of ship's bells, her eyes as bright as the lantern itself. They were to be married. Lena's blood ran cold as she read on. One fateful night, just like this one, a sudden squall had caught Alara's small boat as she sailed to meet him at the lighthouse. Elias had watched in horror from the lamp room as the storm consumed her. Her boat dashed against the Dragon's Teeth. He had kept the light perfectly, but it hadn't been enough to save the one person he loved. The entries became darker. He wrote of his crushing guilt, the solitude that became a prison. He blamed himself, but he made a vow. He would never let the light go out again. He would stand watch, not just for the sailors, but for her. He would keep the light burning as an eternal vigil for his lost love. As Lena turned the pages, she realized the ink was changing. It was becoming fainter, the handwriting more ethereal. The last few entries weren't written in ink at all. They seemed to be etched onto the page with something else, something shimmering. The final entry was dated that very evening. It read, "The storm is here again. It feels familiar. The ache in my soul is finally quiet. The light is dimming, and so am I. But I am not afraid. Because tonight, I see another light, out on the water. It's faint, but it's calling me home. Alara, I'm coming." A sob escaped Lena's lips. She looked from the journal to the still form of Elias. He hadn't died of old age or sickness. He had died of a broken heart that had finally found its peace after 50 years of penance. But why had the light gone out? He vowed it never would. Then she saw it. Propped against the main gear was a small, intricately carved wooden bird. It was jamming the mechanism. It was the last thing he must have done, a final, symbolic act. His watch was over. With tears streaming down her face, Lena gently removed the bird. She found the winding key and, following the diagrams in the logbook, began the arduous task of turning the great clockwork. It was heavy, exhausting work. With a final, groaning click, the mechanism engaged. The great lens began to turn. Now, for the light itself. She located the primary igniter. It was cold, but next to it was a secondary, emergency system, an old, phosphorus-based igniter he'd probably never used. A small note was tied to it. "For the one who finds me. Please. For them. Keep the light." With a trembling hand, she struck the igniter. A brilliant, white-hot flame erupted, and the turning lens caught it, magnified it, and flung a powerful beam of light out into the storm. Below, in Port Blossom, a cheer went up. The light was back. The boats could see. They could navigate the rocks and find their way home. Lena stood in the lamp room, bathed in the rhythmic sweep of the beam, the ghost of a man on one side and his final request on the other. She looked out at the raging sea, and for just a second, through the rain and mist, she thought she saw it too. A second, smaller light, far out on the waves, dancing for a moment before vanishing, as if a lantern had been joyfully reunited with its keeper. Lena stayed in that lighthouse until the storm passed and the sun rose. When the first of the villagers arrived, they found her, exhausted but resolute, keeping watch. She never left. Lena became the new lantern keeper. She kept the light burning, not as a penance, but as a tribute to the man who gave his life to it, and the love that even death could not extinguish. The villagers say that sometimes, on the clearest nights, if you look closely at the lighthouse beam, you can see two shadows tending the light instead of one. The story of Elias and Alara was no longer a tragedy, but a timeless legend, kept alive in the heart of the lighthouse, forever turning, forever shining. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Tales from the Veil. If this story lit a fire in your heart, please let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from beyond the mist. Until next time, keep listening to the whispers.